So good to see everyone. Apologies for that slight wrinkle. Thank you to Myra for shepherding everybody into the right place. This is our first show and tell of the new year. Some of you may have seen our last one at the end of alpha. We're now moving into our beta phase. So if we can move on to the first slide there, Henry. There's a quick overview of what we'll be going through today, covering things around the continuation of our main landscape review, but also highlighting some work we're doing specifically looking at digital inclusion as well, and space for questions. So as always, to highlight that, feel free to add questions as we go in the chat bar. If it makes sense, we'll come to them as we go, but there's space also to ask further questions and to follow up those at various points as we go through the show and tell. If we can move on to our next slide there, recap, and this is actually our new sort of vision mission statement. We're here to support Wales to deliver better digital public services sustainably. That is the goal of CDPS overall. That is definitely reflected, I hope, as we go through these slides and how the things that we're doing directly support that aim. So if we move on to the next slide. Quick recap, some of you may recognize some faces from before Christmas when we had our alpha show and tells. So there is definitely some new faces there. So we have Roshan, who is actually not with us today, who's joined the team. We also have Aoife, who's come in to look specifically at digital inclusion work, which we're talking about a bit later. To highlight there, we've also got Neris, who is available for us today, translating any questions we have in Welsh into English, so feel free to make use of the facility we have there. And we also have Arthur, who's with us, who joined us late in alpha, not on the call today. So moving on to the next slide. I'm going to now hand over to Marie, who's going to talk us through the start of the conversation around our landscape review beta phase, go through into some more detail around what we're doing there. Marie,
thanks, Rick. So as many of you know, just to recap our project goal, we want to understand the landscape of public services in Wales, learn more about challenges, any common challenges that are faced, and opportunities to improve services. And that's to help CDPS focus its efforts in areas to have the most impact and to be better placed to improve public services in Wales. So the landscape review team provides data that allows CDPS to prioritize. So we've come a long way since September. We had an initial phase, a discovery phase, where we worked to understand what to aim for towards the end of the review. So understanding what different stakeholders needed from this, what kind of data would be helpful to them to make decisions, how they were planning on using this data. And we also used this phase to plan out how we were going to collect all of this information, which leads us onto the alpha. So in the alpha, we went out and spoke to 124 different services across Welsh public sectors, from across Welsh divisions, across different public sector organizations, and we learned about how different services deliver their services, and what kind of challenges that they're currently facing. So what we found that in general, people were very enthusiastic about digital transformation, about improving their services, digital or not. And we want to say a big thank you to everyone who took the time to speak to us during this phase in the middle of the pandemic. So it was really valuable to hear about your experiences, and we couldn't have gotten to where we are without that, so thank you. From this engagement in the alpha, we ended up with a data bank of 124 services, as I mentioned, but also an alpha report which details what we identified as the top 16 opportunities to improve Welsh public services. And these are things like we found that a lot of services could benefit from more user research, or that they were keen to embed agile skills but didn't necessarily have the time or the resource or the skills to. And we also found, importantly, that a lot of services face challenges around digital inclusion, which Aoife will be talking a bit more about later on in this presentation. And this alpha report is set to be published very shortly, so probably by the end of the week, so keep an eye out for that.
Thank you, Marie. So I'll then go on to talk about what we're planning to do in the beta phase, so since the new year. So linking back to that overall goal of the landscape review, to find the areas where CDPS can have the highest impact of working with, what we want to come out of the beta with is a short list of leads, so potential projects that we could work on, where we could partner with other public services to transform them and to deliver a really great service. So we're looking for a set of exemplars where we can both work with a public service to think about how it's using digital and to think about how it's supporting its users, but also then to act as case studies for other services on what it means to meet the digital service standards and how to get there. So we're really thinking about where we want to go next. In terms of what we've done since the last time we presented at a show and tell, we started off the new year by thinking about the strategic criteria for selecting those exemplars. So when we look back on those 124 services that we've met with, and a further set that we haven't spoken to directly, but we've heard about from other people, how do we choose those services where we can have the highest impact of working with them? We've actually then set out 12 strategic criteria, which we've then gone and collected kind of the data points against them in order to help us prioritize. And I'll just briefly talk through these. So we have organized them into three tiers of priority. We do think all 12 are important, but some are maybe slightly more important. So this is the top three. So we want to create informed support for mission 1 of the digital strategy for Wales. So that's about delivering really great digital services. So we want the exemplars that we do to be creating kind of wider support for that mission. We of course want the projects that we work on to be highly feasible, and we want the opportunities we work on to grow the level of digital data and technology skills within Welsh government. So we want to be working with our partners to leave kind of long-term capability, not just. Lee, could you go on? We can hear you on the phone.
Might be Lee. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Lee. So we want to be kind of building that long-term capability with the organisations and public services that we work with. Then the next set of, again, really important criteria. We want to showcase the value of agile iterative delivery, so that kind of ways of working around digital. We are keen that the work that we do is really well aligned with the priorities of our partners, so it kind of meets either Welsh Government, local authority or health and care priorities. We're keen to stimulate the SME digital sector, so thinking about how we work with commercial partners to deliver great public services. We're always thinking about kind of bilingual service delivery and making sure that all of our services are really effective for people interacting with them in English or in Welsh. And finally, we are really keen to showcase ways to deliver tech net zero. Again, that kind of brings in the sustainability part of our new mission statement. The final set of criteria that we're keen to work with services with a high volume of users, so really visible services where we can have a really high impact by making them great. We would like to make services as efficient as possible, and digital transformation can be a good way to do that. We want to showcase what it actually means to be using some of these digital technologies, sharing technology, sharing tools, kind of sharing components and features. And finally, this is more thinking about the kind of set of exemplars that we might work on rather than individual one, but we're keen that we kind of span all of Welsh public services across geography, but also across kind of sectors and different types of public services. So then other things that we've done in this first month back, we have been looking at the data that we've already gathered, and we have reviewed that in order to identify potential leads. So those criteria I've just talked through, we have gone and scored each of the services that we've met with to see which of them kind of come out highly against that set of criteria. And then in addition to that, we've been looking at where do we actually need more information. So where do we not yet have a good view of what would be a high impact place to go. And an example of that is, for example, in our original landscape review, we had less coverage in the health and care public service space. So we spoke to less NHS organisations than maybe other areas. So that's a gap that we're aware of and that we want to fill going forwards. So then, thinking about what we're going to do next, as I mentioned, we want to take forward the set of potential leads. We have identified through the services we've already met a subset where we think there could be a really interesting opportunity to partner. And over the next few weeks, we would like to reach out to those organisations to speak to them about whether the services that we think might make up a good potential exemplar, they would also be interested in working with us on it. There are then some areas where we think we generally want to understand a bit more about the landscape. As I mentioned, health and care is the particular one there. We want to continue working closely with the Welsh Government and local government CDOs, as well as Digital Health and Care Wales, in order to understand their priorities and identify which projects they would be keen to collaborate on with us. And we're keen to then talk to the organisations running these services in order to iterate this list. Finally, internally, we're thinking about how CDPS can best make use of the data that we've gathered. So both that data about all of those services we've met with, but also the contacts that we've made and our kind of review of other data that's out there on services. We're thinking about how CDPS can use that in our projects, and also whether we want to share that more widely as well. And that brings me to the end of the update on the main landscape review. So before we go and talk about digital inclusion, does anyone have any questions? I can see there's some in the chat. I don't know if we want to talk about any of them.
I think there was a general question there from Glyn about, are we going to invite digital inclusion colleagues to the show and tell? I have a plan to do that for the next one when we've progressed a little. Myra, you got a question there?
I've just got a bit of a comment, and it's the first show and tell from this project that I've attended in my new role, and hello to everyone and thank you for coming. I just wanted to be really clear, and it's a really helpful summary, Henry, that people will have the full Alpha report available to them, and as Henry was saying, we're hoping to get that out in the next few days, end of the week, because there's a lot of detail there, and the really useful thing about that extensive landscape review, although as the team say, you know, one always needs more data, is that it describes where we can make really big improvements in our services. You know, we've covered that ground quite quickly with you now, because in beta there's a lot of work going on in flight, which we need you to be briefed on as well. But that will give you the opportunity to delve into that report, come back and question us, you know, open conversations about that, and we want to make that available to you as quickly as possible. Where we're going with the beta report or the beta phase of work, as Henry has outlined, but I just want to restate it, is in that context and in the knowledge of the data that we've got, where is the best place for CDPS to partner and work and focus our efforts in the next year to draw out the exemplar projects to demonstrate where we can deliver better and improved digital services. So that's the analysis we're doing at the moment, and that will be in dialogue with you, and we can fully share with you, as Henry has done here to an extent, you know, the criteria that we're applying ourselves as a starting point, because there's so many areas of the Welsh public sector that we could work in and where we could partner, and so it's really important that we prioritise our portfolio next year in conjunction with you in the most effective way and the most useful way. And we're very grateful to health colleagues who've said that they'll make more data available to us. And this is going to be a kind of ongoing process as well, because although we've got some initial data, as we all know, we can get much, much better data on how our services are structured and how they're performing, and how we can work to improve them. So we really welcome doing this in dialogue with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Myra. Glyn, do you want to come in there as well?
Yeah, thanks. So my traditional question at these show and tells, Rick. I'm just interested in the last bit that Henry spoke about the data side, and I welcome Myra's views on this as well. One of the outcomes we wanted from the landscape review was a baseline on, you know, how we were doing, which would give us where we can measure progress in the future. future in terms of digital services. And that's really important in terms of monitoring, well, just monitoring anyway, but also in terms of the digital strategy for Wales. So I'm just wondering how the how that will come out of the Alpha report, and will there be any thoughts on how we can maintain or continue or revisit that baseline in the future?
So I think probably if I put a couple of initial thoughts, and maybe Myra or Henry might want to come in on this. So there's definitely a lot more details, as Myra's been saying, in the version of the Alpha report that we'll be publishing shortly about what we found. And we're highlighting, as we talked about before Christmas, the key opportunity areas where we think, we can do more. I think in terms of how we may maintain the data that's come out of that and make sure it's current and then revisit it, as you said, use that as a benchmark. That's an ongoing conversation. I think that's one of the conversations that's going on within CDPS now, and we'll pick up through beta. So we don't really have a clear answer on that as yet, but it's definitely on the agenda. Henry or Myra, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, you're absolutely on the money there, Glyn, and I will reaffirm what Rick said. In fact, we actually had a meeting yesterday about the data assets that we have created as a consequence of doing the landscape review, and this wealth of data and how we maintain it and how we potentially can use it for benchmarking in the future. At this point in time, because we're in a short sprint, and I'm very keen that the outcomes of beta are available prior to Easter. Actually, my response to the team was, yes, absolutely. We should absolutely be looking at the data and what we can do with it and how we can develop it potentially as a CDPS product or service, or how we take it forward across, use it. But can we get the portfolio defined and the exemplars identified in conversation with all of you here, and then we'll focus on how we reiterate, if you like, and keep this data set alive and how we exploit it. So yes is the answer to your question, but right now in the next few weeks, I think it's really important that we do the in-depth analysis to help us shape the CDPS portfolio.
Thanks, Myra. Glyn, I'm trusting that answers your question. Good. Back to you, Henry, I think.
Great, thank you, Rick. So I will just kick off with a bit of an introduction then about digital inclusion, and then I will pass over to Aoife for a bit more detail in a moment. So as we mentioned, we have kicked off a slightly different piece of work looking at digital inclusion. So this is all about how we ensure that all people in Wales are able to access the internet, and then to a lesser extent also how they're able to access digital public services. This was something that really came out of the Alpha. Many of the people who are running digital public services that we met with were really keen to think about this. And it's something that's really on their mind, making sure that as they continue to improve their digital services, they continue to transform their organizations. They don't have a group of people who are left behind and not able to access those kind of fundamental needs. So we have then kicked off this separate piece of work, specifically looking at what is Wales doing at the moment to tackle digital inclusion. This is something that was commissioned initially by Glyn and the Office of the Chief Digital Officer, and we've been working really closely with the Welsh Government and the Digital Communities Wales on this. What we're trying to do is to create a single directory covering the recent, current and planned activities that different organisations in Wales are doing to improve digital inclusion. So the things that people are doing to get the public happy and confident and able to use the internet. On the back of that, we are then doing some analysis to hopefully guide kind of future Welsh Government policy around digital inclusion. So looking at whether there are any trends in the geography or kind of who those activities are targeted at, and how Wales is comparing to other regions or other nations in terms of that kind of overall set of activity. I will now pass on to Aoife to give a bit more detail.
Great, thank you, Henry. So in the past couple of weeks, we have already created a draft directory. So this is what we imagine the directory to look like. And as we gather information from people in the organizations, we'll start to populate that. And we've agreed the information on the sort of digital inclusion activities that we'll be collecting. We agreed that with the Welsh Government Prosperous Futures Division. And we've started speaking to organisations such as the Wales Cooperative Centre and the Digital Communities Wales programme that they help to run on how we can collect information about those, what they're doing to support digital inclusion. We're also keen to branch out, and find out what organisations are doing beyond the Digital Communities Wales programme, so finding smaller organisations as well. So we expect from talking to people and what we've heard, we expect the things that people will be doing to support digital inclusion will be things like directly assisting people to use digital services. So that's where they can get online but may not be able to use a specific service. And that really relates to digital public services. And ensuring people can access broadband and mobile data, such as running discount schemes for people who might not be able to afford that. And things like gifting or loaning devices, again, for people who may not be able to afford a laptop. And also helping people who might need adjustments to digital devices or services, and helping them to access them, know how they can access those different adjustments on devices. And also programs such as helping people to develop basic digital skills just to get online and have that confidence and motivation that they're able to do that. And linked to that, gaining essential digital skills for work. So helping job seekers able to present with the skills that they can find jobs. So following on from that, we'll be sending out a survey. This is currently in draft, but we expect it to be completed in the next few days. We'll send this out to organisations who we believe are doing digital inclusion as part of their day-to-day sort of running, or as a separate thing that they've been funded to do. We'll send that through the Digital Inclusion Alliance Wales, and we're also looking for other platforms that we'd be able to send that survey out through. They'll be able to fill out the details of what they're doing, and then we can capture that and populate the directory with that. Along with that, we'll also introduce our work to the Digital Inclusion and Skills Programme Board. I believe that will be in early March, and hopefully that will allow us to reach some more organisations who we wouldn't have otherwise heard of. And we'll be continuing one-to-one conversations with organisations to understand what they're doing to support digital inclusion. And if you are running digital inclusion activities or know of organisations running digital inclusion activities, then we would love to hear from you and have that conversation.
Great. I think again, so we do have a final kind of next steps and kind of how you can get in touch. But before we do that, do we have any questions specifically on digital inclusion? Okay, if there's no particular questions, then I will pass over to Rick.
Okay, so this is the usual wrap up. If we would love, as always, to hear from people either around the main landscape review work or the work that Aoife's just been describing around digital inclusion. The email address is there. It's the digital landscape review at digitalpublicservices.gov.wales. Do feel free to get in touch, and if you can help us around the work we're doing in any way. We can, as always, we'll be recording this show and tell and putting it out on YouTube. You can see our previous show and tells from Discovery and Alpha on the link that we have there on our CDPS YouTube channel. And we should probably just note there's a couple of people who might have joined a bit late. We apologise for the slight confusion with the invite where we had a duplicated Teams and Zoom invite. We are still planning to do these on Zoom going forward. I have checked. The reason we do these in Zoom is because of the translation channel facilities that it currently offers. So that is why we are on Zoom, not Teams. And then just also to highlight that we will be doing a further show and tell on the 1st of March, and then another one after that as well. We'll give you an update on how things have gone, and hopefully be able to kind of share some more information as we talk to more people around public services in Wales, and also progress our work on digital inclusion and really kind of refining that list of potential opportunities for CDPS for people to work with. So that is the usual wrap up. Do you have any further questions at this point? Double check the chat bar. Thanks for the offer on the large strategic projects day. We'll definitely be in contact around that.
Thank you.
Okay. I think at that point, it leaves me to say thank you very much for everyone to attending. Thank you, as always, for everyone who's participated in the review so far. We really do appreciate the fantastic kind of positive response we've had so far, and look forward to talking to you all again next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks all very much.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.